Hello and welcome to Media MD. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot and
And so on Media MD, each fortnight we prescribe each other a piece of media that the other person has somehow missed out on.
Yep, that's right. And this week it's my turn. So I'm bringing you a TV show that I can't believe you've missed. And this is Joss Whedon's Firefly.
Okay. I feel like I have to say something at this point because in the kind of communities that we're a part of, the kind of nerd internet community, Firefly is such a big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of bizarre I haven't seen it. It's sort of similar to another thing I haven't seen, Game of Thrones.
Yes.
I feel like I have to address this, which is that I never got around to watching it, okay? And you've also recommended me Dollhouse, I think, in the past. Not on the podcast, but just in real life, another Whedon thing. And I'm big into kind of things that the Whedons have had their hands in. You know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is something that Joss Whedon was involved with. And now the other two Whedons with so
you've got Jed and Marissa. So Jed, who I personally believe is the underrated Whedon.
He's the underdog Whedon who you think really has the fight in him.
I would argue he's better than Joss, but Firefly is definitely Joss's baby, and probably the pinnacle.
Buffy as well, is that Buffy?
That was Joss, yeah.
That was Joss,
they also did Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog.
I have seen that.
And that was definitely more Jed and Marissa. That was sort of Jed's first big one that he had a hand in.
The impression I'm getting is that I am more a fan of Jed and Marissa Whedon then, because I just haven't
Possibly,
seen
but I mean, that's not to say you wouldn't be a fan of Joss. I would just say, in my experience, Jed being behind something is probably a better indicator that I'm going to love it.
Okay, fair enough. Now, full disclosure, when you first found out that I hadn't seen Firefly, we did watch, the first 2 or 3 episodes?
I think 2.
Yeah, we tried to binge through them and that kind of stopped, and then I was going to watch them and then we were going to do it for the podcast, so it has been on hold. I probably would have gotten to it about maybe a month ago or 2 months ago, but it's still a long time that I haven't seen Firefly.
Yeah, exactly.
When does it come out?
2002, I think. And then so it got cancelled, and so then they got a movie to sort of wrap up the plot. Yep. And that was like 2005.
Okay.
So, fairly old. And I mean, you've sort of seen enough of it, but it's like a literal space western.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've seen the anime Cowboy Bebop, but...
Yeah, I have been told by other people that, particularly the first episode of Cowboy Bebop, is very Firefly-ish, and then it sort of forks off and goes bananas.
I've seen I stopped watching Cowboy Bebop about halfway through, but from what I've seen of it and from the impression that I hear of it, it's very Firefly-esque.
Yeah. I mean, so I think, in a lot of ways, the fact that the show got cancelled so soon is very beneficial to its reputation, because all 14 episodes, there's maybe 2 that I would say I don't like, but I would still happily rewatch them.
You'd happily accept them.
They're my least 2 favorite, but I still like them. Like in the grand, if I went to go and rewatch some other show, there'd be a lot more episodes where I'd just be, skip this one. But you wouldn't do that with Firefly. No, so even though they're my least favorite ones, and so the fact is, it didn't get time to get stale and produce any.
It didn't turn
week
into
episodes.
Arrow, is what we're thinking.
Yeah,
it didn't get so go downhill.
No, exactly. It didn't even have time to say do 4 good seasons, but have those 2 or 3 episodes somewhere in the middle.
Kind of mediocre, but you just
So I think the fact that it got cancelled is sort of
it went out on top.
Yeah, a bit of martyrdom. I think.
But then they made the movie. Right?
Yeah.
So how does the movie play into it? Is it after the TV show?
Yeah, it is. So it's sort of set a few months after where the TV show finished, and it's essentially all the ideas they had for season 2. Compressed into an hour and a half. So it's still a good movie, but you'll notice it feels very rushed, and they'll just sort of introduce characters you're already meant to know them, but you don't, because they would have had an episode where introducing them, whereas now they've just slotted in 2 lines of dialogue to sort of establish what this character's deal is.
Yeah, okay. So season 1 kind of ended with some loose threads, and the movie is to tie
well, it wasn't even the season finale. It actually got cancelled mid-production. So you can there's 14 episodes, and they've published the script to the 15th episode that was about to enter production when they got cancelled.
How many were in this original run?
I think it was going to be 2022. It was going to be one of those full season.
Oh boy! So the movie is just kind of wrapping up the end of season 1.
So it was sort of what was going to be the end of season 1 and what their ideas were for season 2.
Okay.
It's like where they sort of saw the series being by the end of season 2.
So season 1 ends abruptly then?
It just doesn't sort of end. Like it's it's like one of their monster of the. It's not a monster of the week. It's like one of their just standalone episodes. And then that's just sort of the last one. I wouldn't even call it a finale. It's just the last one.
Yeah. So are there any kind of... In the first 2 episodes that I've seen, they didn't really introduce that much of an overarching plot. Besides those, like, what are they called? Reapers or Ravagers or something?
The Reavers.
Like, Reavers, that's the one. That are like these super evil, cannibal, whatever things.
Yeah. I mean, it all sort of ties into it. I wouldn't necessarily say this show didn't necessarily have an overarching plot in that sense where, like, you'll get a lot of these shows, like all the X-Files based ones, like Supernatural and everything, where it's like, Monster of the Week, one that deals with the overarching plot.
Hint
Monster of the Week.
the big villain.
Yeah.
Monster of the Week, more villain.
Everything, this, like, Firefly works quite well because almost every episode is both standalone and helps establish part of the universe and the conflict that's really driving the whole thing, which is this sort of battle between the remnants of the Independents, because there's like a galactic civil war type thing. And then there's like conspiracy theories as to why the show got cancelled and screwed. It's almost like if you were to compare it to the American Civil War, Firefly is very pro-South. Essentially, apart from the racism, so it's not really racism.
Slave races?
No, so that's the thing. It's like apart from the whole slavery angle, the Independents, like, which are essentially all the heroes are a member of the Independents, essentially represent the South. So it's essentially. It's very pro-South, except for slavery.
But I feel like being pro-independent is not necessarily being pro-South in American Civil War.
But like the way it's set just after a civil war, and it's like, oh, we're a part of this union of planets now, but we don't want to be. And so lots of people think that maybe,
space.
And maybe like a lot of people just sort of think that maybe Fox got a bit nervous with the obvious parallels you could draw between supporting the South and supporting the show.
Maybe in the final few episodes, it was like they introduced a slave race and they introduced the Abraham Lincoln character and all kinds of crazy things. Maybe Fox made the right call, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because I'd say the average viewer of this show would very much not be someone who you'd attribute with that sort of racist like
so it's kind
Southern
of
stereotype.
Progressive nerd culture has become more and more progressive.
Yeah, exactly.
In some sects, obviously there are some places where it's become more and more regressive and like 4chan and Trump style, but on the whole, the internet culture and the kind of progressive culture have kind of merged into one in a lot of ways, right? So Firefly is kind of that audience. Is that right?
Exactly. But I mean, what really drives the show are the characters, and so like another interesting thing you can probably sort of look for as you're watching it, as well as like the whole like Southern angle. I was watching the DVD commentary, and they sort of talked about how they tried to establish the ship that they live in as a sort of 10th member of the crew and a 10th character. And so it's actually kind of interesting trying to watch that because the ship is very much, it's like this complex machine,
but it's definitely not sentient.
It's not sentient, but like it almost functions as a part of the crew, not necessarily a 10th character, but as a 10th member of the crew, the way
that they all kind of use, like, instead of the captain, what's his name, Captain Mal? Sending this guy out on a mission, it's kind of like, oh, well, the ship can kind of take care of this thing.
Exactly. And just like, it's just a very interesting part of like how important the ship is to how everyone holds together. Like, it's not just that sort of show where they could just jump in a new ship. Like, you know, they couldn't break the SS Enterprise and just like get a new ship. Like
losing. You're referencing more things that I don't really.
Like Serenity would very much, the loss of Serenity would very much impact their group.
Serenity's the name of the movie, but Serenity is also the name of the ship.
Yeah, so Serenity is the name of the ship, and it's also named after a place in the show.
And that's
so the reason the movie's called Serenity is because Fox still owned the rights to Firefly and so Universal made the movie with them. So they managed to get the rights to the characters, but not the name Firefly.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, so that's why the movie's called Serenity. Serenity is also the name of the pilot, the name of the ship.
Name of the pilot?
The pilot episode, sorry. I should be more specific. So you've got the movie, the pilot episode, the ship, and a place. They're all called Serenity.
So I have to talk about the pilot, the pilot character, who's called Wash. That's right. Now, as someone who has been on the internet for a while, I've come across Reddit threads which are like, oh, what's the saddest thing that you've ever seen? Or what's one part of a movie or a TV show that's always gets to you?
Wash will come up,
Yeah, I do know that he dies, right? And there's something to do with a leaf on a wind, is that right?
And that's just sort of his catchphrase. Like, he'll often say, I'm a leaf on the wind, watch me soar, as he's like piloting real boss-like.
And so that comes back in a sad, reappropriated way.
Yeah, so you'll sort of... Yeah, I mean, I won't tell you anymore. You'll know it when you see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean
But that is pretty Whedon, isn't it?
It is, and that I mean, it was one of the big. I think this was one of his first big movies and like TV shows where he just
killed off.
Started going to town on some main characters and was like, you can't do that.
Yeah, all right.
So I guess the other thing as well, like I've got the DVD here for you, and I would very much suggest that you watch it in the order it appears on the DVD because Fox aired the episodes out of order. So if you just go online,
huge disaster.
So if you go online and just look up an episode order, like you may end up with the wrong one because there's two big ones. There's the airing order and like the intended order.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, because the pilot is very long and Fox said too depressing. So what they did was actually aired the second episode, which I believe is the only other one you've seen where they rob a train. And then didn't end up airing the pilot until the end. That was actually the last episode.
The last one they showed.
Jesus Christ. And then a lot of the other ones in the middle kind of got jumbled up. And so that's another thing that's attributed to why it didn't get the viewer numbers when it was on TV was because it's actually like, as far as a TV show where you could just jump in and enjoy it, it's actually quite hard to do because what drives it are the characters. And you need to have seen the pilot that introduces them to really follow and care.
Is the pilot the one where the priest comes on board?
Yes, yeah. Okay. So it's basically only 3 or 4 of the crew are actually together in the pilot.
Yeah, and then the priest comes on and
there's a brother and sister, and the hooker was part of it originally.
Oh, okay.
But most of the crew, so everything comes together and their backstories and relationships are explained in the pilot. And it's really hard to appreciate the other episodes without that.
Oh, the brother and the sister who's like in the freezer or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, this is coming back to me now.
Okay,
cool.
So I think, I mean, the only other thing I can think of is like, again, coming back to why it was cancelled. It was aired on like Friday nights, which is not a good...
Now that we're outside, now that the Whedons have all moved on and the show's been completely wrapped up.
Yes.
Fillion is doing Castle for however much longer that
lasts,
whatever.
It's amazing. He still goes to cons and talks about like Firefly, and he keeps talking like it was like 2 years ago he was at a con and somebody was like, what would you do if you won the lottery? And he was like, oh, I'd buy the rights to Firefly. and then everyone was like, sort of like, you know, everyone sort of giggled, and then the interviewer went to ask the next question, and Nathan just sort of cut him off and was just like, you know, like, I think we could get this person back. And he just sort of went through the whole cast and just started talking about which ones he could and couldn't get back.
So do you think it's over?
I think so. It's probably better left dead at this point.
Yeah. Are you kind of
like, so there's a comic series that sort of went, and I believe they're doing some more of them. And that's being written by Zach Whedon. I think it is.
There's another
the third one. Yes.
Oh my god!
And to be honest, I've got those comics and I read them, and I was not a huge fan.
Are they canon?
I think so. Like, it's been published by Dark Horse and everything, so it's obviously sort of all in it. But it kind of felt a bit fan fiction-y. I wasn't a huge fan. Like, it was one of those things that tried to start bringing everything together and too epic. So I wasn't a huge fan of that, but. There was an MMO coming out, or maybe it already came out.
Jesus Christ.
But it was like a mobile MMO. Like, I remember there was like a trailer for a Firefly MMO, and I was like, yeah, and it was like only for iOS and Android. I was like, oh.
Okay, bit weird.
So, but I think as far as like, if they wanted to bring the universe back, they could try and do that with a new crew, maybe with one character or some like
would it be worth
cameos, but... No, I don't think so. I think like with the sort of stuff the Whedons are all involved in now, I'm not sure it's worth it.
So now that it's all over, do you think Fox made the right call or the wrong call? How happy are you with it? Do you think there should have been more?
Yeah, there should have been. Like this, like I said, the show could have gone for another 4 seasons and only had a couple of bad episodes.
Okay.
Like, I think it really would have been one of the best sci-fi shows ever. But in saying that, now it's too late, and even though they cancelled it, they gave us 14 episodes, which all turned out to be amazing.
And the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. I'll borrow those DVDs and we'll meet back again in 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
Alright, and through the magic of audio editing, we are back moments later, but it has been 2 weeks.
Yep.
Alright, so Firefly. I watched it all, and yeah, it was pretty good. I can definitely see why people liked it as much as they did. So how should we talk about this? I think the best way to break it down is I'm going to list off the episodes I thought were the best and some of the episodes I thought were the worst. Yep. And then we can get to the movie a bit later, I think, because that's a bit of a separate entity.
Yeah, okay.
Let's start with what I thought was the best episode. The last one, for sure. I think the last one was easily the best.
Yeah.
For 2 reasons. One reason is that Jabal Early, his character was just interesting and psychotic and fun to watch. You know, he was like a slightly deaf bounty hunter, very crazy. Anyway. And the second reason is that the final episode really was the first time that River did anything and wasn't just a plot device. You know?
I think there's one scene earlier in the show where she shoots the 3 guys.
Yes.
And that's it.
But I would even say that is a bit of a plot device for her, because I feel like the way they use River for most of the show is they need some motivator for something to happen. Oh, let's just have River do something crazy. Yeah. Or, you know. So there are scenes, like the scene where she slashes at Jane is obviously a big motivator for him in that episode where he sells them out. There's scenes where she'll just like go wandering off and do something, and then, you know, someone will be like, "Oh no, River, come back!" and then he gets kidnapped or whatever. You know, she's a bit of a plot device. And the TV show, the final episode of the TV show, is the only place where I really think that she is actually acts like a real person in a lot of ways. Yeah,
well, and it's that first one, because it's the one at the climax where she offers to go with Jubal because she's like, she feels bad for all the trouble.
Yeah, and she feels like she is the cause of a lot of pain in Simon's life.
And it's the first human thing she has rather than just being like psychotic.
Yeah, and even her psychosis kind of fell a bit flat for me for a lot of it. I mean, it was kind of like unbelievable in some ways. Like, there are some scenes where she would be believably traumatized and have PTSD and all these things, but there'd be some scenes where she'd just kind of be like reverting to a child in a weird way, and it would kind of not really make sense that is how someone would really react in her situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been tortured by men in blue gloves and lab coats and whatever, but, you know.
And especially with the movie, you know, sort of revealing that she is definitely psychic and all that. Like, it sort of explains why it wasn't exactly textbook psychosis.
That's true. I
get why at the time. Sure.
Yeah, that's fair enough. We'll talk more about her characterization in the movie as well, because I want to talk about that a bit. But I'd just like to quickly mention my other favorite episode, which was Janestown.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was a pretty... And not just because... I mean, it was obviously a funny episode, right? But that, I feel like, was the only time that Jane really had an emotional connecting moment. There's the scene at the end where the kid from the town dives in front of the bullet for him, and he feels like guilt, and he feels shitty because he's not worthy of like the reverence that he's getting.
It's a really quality episode because it on the surface it just appears like the goofy, funny episode. Yeah. But then it actually it's one of the only ones with serious character development for Jane.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Jane, he doesn't really develop. He kind of advances and regresses in a lot of ways. He betrays the Tams at one point, which is kind of like his character arc a little bit, but he doesn't really develop except in Janestown, and that's why I really liked it for sure.
They talked briefly, one of the ideas for an episode they had in season 2 was it was going to be Jane came into a lot of money somehow, and so he left the crew and like formed his own crew, and they became like a rival crew. And then eventually, because he wasn't a very good leader, it was all going to go to shit, and eventually he'd come back with his tail between his legs.
See, that would have been a good character development episode for him for sure.
That would have been a really good episode. They've gone over a bunch of the other episode ideas they have. Some of them are dark.
Oh really? What's one of the darkest ones? Give me a dark one.
Oh, okay. So you probably wouldn't remember it. In the pilot episode, there's a moment where like when they think they're going to get boarded by Reavers.
Yes.
And Inara like opens up
the capsule.
Yeah, and there's like a needle, like a syringe of stuff in there.
Yeah.
So you're going to find out at some point. It's
kind of like a suicide thing. Right?
It's the opposite. It's made for companions, and when they inject themselves with it, anyone who has sex with them dies.
Huh.
So anyway, what was going to happen is there's going to be an episode. Inara gets kidnapped by Reavers. Fuck. They eventually catch up to the ship. They get onto the ship, and it's just full of dead bodies. So there's just like 100 dead Reavers everywhere. And they just find like Anara in the corner.
Fuck me.
Just like crying and really scarred. And then it was going to be that like after that, Mal started treating her with more respect. Because she was like, and she was just going to be like completely traumatized by it.
Yeah, of course.
Like, you know, sort of it being, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of implied.
Yeah, she was, but heavily implied. Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of glad they didn't get around to making that one.
That might be a bit too dark, I think. Let's talk about an episode that I didn't like. Now, I remember in the preamble part, where we were talking about Firefly before I had seen it, you mentioned that there were only 1 or 2 episodes that you would say you didn't like as much.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and guess what one of those is. Mm-hmm. I don't know the title of it, but it's the one where they're delivering like a cattle shipment and Shepherd Book gets shot and Simon gets kidnapped by like the hill people.
Yeah, that's one of the 2. That's the one I'm sort of on the borderline. There's another one I dislike more, but that's definitely one of the 2 that where I'm like more. Yeah, that was one of the ones where I'm just sort of like, because nothing really happens in that one. You get a bit of development on Simon, and that's really it.
There are things that happen that are just... So let's break down the plot. So they go into this town. There's a lot of backstory kind of stuff which happens. Yeah. And then Shepherd Book gets shot and Simon is kidnapped by some...
Simon and River are kidnapped.
Simon and River, that's right.
Because it's like a little settlement out and they don't have a doctor and they find out he's a doctor.
Yeah, so they take him to be...
And they take River to be collateral.
Yeah. And then nothing happens for a while, and then Mal is like, no, I don't care about him, let's just leave him. And then they fly away for a bit, and then they come back, and kind of just like nothing really makes sense. It just kind of feels like...
Yeah, I felt like what they were going for was it was meant to be this sense. Simon's meant to start feeling betrayed when they fly off without him.
Yeah.
And he's meant to feel abandoned. And then I guess when they came back, maybe he was meant to feel like he was a member of the Cross. But it doesn't come across. It doesn't come across.
You can see, I feel like they were going for it, but it was too overt and it also didn't work in a weird way. And Mal just kind of wanted to leave Simon behind in a way that doesn't really make sense. And then he had a change of heart for... basically no reason and came back, you know?
I feel like really all the episode does, in the grand scheme of things, is hint at stuff. It's the first one that sort of hints that River can be psychic, because she, like, reads the mind of that girl who's mute. It also it's the first one that really hints that Shepherd Book has a lot more going on in his past.
Yeah.
But that's really all it contributes
to
the series
really
as a whole.
Anything.
Like, it just lays seeds, which could have easily been dropped in other episodes.
That is the only episode which I would say... I didn't like that episode at all. I was just very uninterested watching it. Now, I don't know what your other one that you don't like is. Can I guess? Is it the first time you meet the woman? I love
all the ones with what's her name?
I can't remember what her name is. She's in Mad Men.
Yeah.
Christina Hendricks.
Yeah.
Hendricks?
Yeah.
Okay, what is it? Hit me.
Yeah, it's the one where they find the lone guy on the ship that was invaded by Reavers.
Oh, the Reaver.
He becomes crazy. Yeah. It was probably interesting the first time, but like when I'm rewatching the series, at least that's sort of one that I just skip.
Okay, I can see that.
I think, especially all that one really does is establish how bad the Reavers are bad, and like if you've already seen the series, you sort of know that.
Yeah.
Like, and that whole episode is driven by the mystery of what's happening.
So on the second watch, it definitely would fall flat.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I want to touch on. Actually, there's a couple more things I want to touch on. Let's first start with... I'm just going to say this about the show as a whole. I did like it. And I liked that there were a lot of parts where it really subverted your expectations and subverted cliches. And one example I would point to is the scene where you first meet Nishka. And the episode where you first meet Nishka. The train robbery one.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And at the end, they've returned the medicine and they've been like, all right, we're not doing this here. Take the money back. We're not doing your job. And the guy's like, you're fucked anyway. I'm going to go tell Nishka. And Mal's like, all right, boom, and shoots him in the head. Or shoves him into the engine or something, right? And it's just very unexpected because it really subverts cliches in a way that the show does a lot. Like I say, we're having this fight. Or Mal's having this fight with a guy and... Zoe's like, oh no, this is something he needs to do for himself, and he's like, no, it's not, and then she just shoots him.
Yeah, Joss has a bit of a habit of that. He likes to do the exact opposite of what you're expecting, which has almost become, if you've watched enough of his stuff, it becomes predictable again because he's always going to do the exact opposite of what you would expect.
But the thing is, he does it at times, but then at other times,
he doesn't,
it really follows the cliche to the letter. Yeah. I'd say Firefly is a very cliched show in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Except when it intentionally avoids, it's either follow the cliche to the letter or do the exact opposite of the cliche and never anywhere. Yeah. It's a bit weird like that.
That's fair.
Yeah. Although one thing I did definitely like about it that I don't think was too cliched was the Reavers.
Yeah.
I feel like the Reavers are definitely good. A very interesting and a very good part of the world, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I especially at the time, I think it was a fairly unique idea.
I mean, they're barbarians, but in another show, it would have been like everyone talks about how barbaric they are, and then they're actually just kind of like people that do one or two fucked up things, but they haven't gone all the way with it. But in Firefly, they really commit to it, for sure. And I guess let's segue into talking about the movie, because the Reavers are kind of built up a little bit in the show, but where they really become explored is in the movie.
Yeah, and so that sort of comes back to what I was saying with the movie is like season 2 compressed in. Yeah. Like I think they've sort of said that season 2 was going to sort of more and more delve into the Reavers.
And their backstory, obviously.
Because the movie sort of introduces that idea where space is becoming crowded because the Reavers and the Alliance are both expanding.
Yeah.
And so I think season 2 was going to start to address that more and more, where they would bounce between encounters with the Alliance and the Reavers.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. So I guess something we should talk about is the backstory of the Reavers. So they were kind of created by the Alliance when they tested out this new pacifism drug to kind of quell the population on this one settlement. And it worked on 90%, and they just kind of stopped doing it. Well, it worked, in air quotes, in that they stopped wanting anything, and they eventually starved to death just because they were so lazy and unhungry, and, you know. And then on the other 10%, it had the opposite reaction and turned them into Reavers.
Yeah,
right? And then presumably more Reavers kept coming because of a similar thing to in the third episode with the lone survivor.
I read that third episode as essentially describing
how Reavers
reproduce.
How Reavers reproduce, exactly.
Because I doubt they're sort of cultured enough to mate
and protect their young.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like one criticism of the movie, which I think you brought up in the preamble episode, was that it was rushed. And obviously that's a result of having fit a season and a half into a movie.
And there's just those moments where they're like, oh, let's quickly ask Mr. Universe.
Yeah, Mr. Universe, exactly.
Like, what?
He's just a guy that just kind of is there.
And so there's a short comic series, like I probably should have given to you, which acts as a prequel to the movie. So it very quickly introduces... There's the two other guys right at the start in the bar. They're like the twins.
Yes, and maybe the postman guy as well.
So those characters and Mr. Universe, they all get introduced very briefly in this comic, which just sort of quickly goes over. I think it says that there's about 6 months between the last episode and the movie, and it quickly carries over all that. But it's not very thorough as well. Yeah. It basically serves to exactly bring up the plot points that are relevant to the movie. It's not like it's not like a standalone story at all.
Gives you a little bit of introduction though. Okay, that's cool. So the movie as a whole, going back to how it felt rushed, I think that was best exemplified by River in the movie, because River had been a slow burn in the TV show, revealing exactly what is going on there. And then in the movie, it's just like flashback about River. You find out she's got ninja powers. You find out she can do this thing. She's psychic. And then, you know, she demonstrates her abilities one time in the bar. And then later on, she beats up a whole bunch of Reavers.
Yeah.
It does feel very rushed, but it is kind of justifiable in a way.
And there's a lot of, like, there's bits of, I'd almost call it, like, fan service in that way. Like the whole River alone against the Reavers. Like, that fight was just there. So that, like, people who'd been waiting for the movie would be like,
Firefly. That would have been a whole episode, just her fighting Reavers.
It's almost the same. There's that great moment where, on Mr. Universe's planet, where like, the Alliance is waiting for Mal and he pops out. And then all the Reavers, and it's just like a close fight. And again, that's just that other thing where it's like, well, this is the movie, this is the end. Let's just, like,
let's just throw everything at it. You finally see what Reavers look like.
Yeah. I liked the way they messed with viewers a bit, because one of the big things, like one of the big mysteries in the show is Shepard Book's backstory.
Shepard Book's past, yeah.
And just they have that bit where Mal just like asks him about it, and then he's like, I'll tell you like next time, and then next time
next time he's dead.
But since then, I think it was around 2011, I want to say, they brought out a comic.
They brought out the Shepherd's Tale comic book, right?
And that just goes into it in depth. It's a pretty good read.
Yes.
A bit of a hard read, because it it does this like flashback style
boy.
format. So like when you're in the middle of the book, you're about 4 layers in. So you're going down, you hit the middle of the book, and then it goes like back out again. And so I was sort of, when I was reading it, I wasn't completely concentrating, and then I realized I just wasn't following what was happening at all. So you got to sort of commit.
Pay. This is a book that you have to pay attention.
Yeah. But it explains it all, and it's a pretty good story. Like it's a pretty adequate explanation as to everything that happened to him.
All right, I'll have to take a look at that another time.
Yeah.
But to close up this discussion of Firefly, let me just give you my ratings, my out of 10s. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give the show and the movie separate out of 10s.
Yep.
I'm going to give the show a 7, and I'm going to give the movie an 8.5 for a total combined rating of 7.5.
Okay, it's close math, but yes.
Whatever, 7 and...
rounding.
There's no 3/4 in this system, apparently. First episode system, we're making it up as we go.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. I would have rated the show higher than the movie.
I was talking to this about another of my friends who had seen the show, and they said the same thing. But I feel like the movie, maybe it was just because it was shorter and I could enjoy it in one kind of bite-sized piece. It felt more like an entire thing. But I definitely enjoyed the movie more, especially because there were some episodes of the show where it's just like, I don't want to watch this. You know, this part of the show is just not interesting.
Yeah.
But I never really felt unengaged with the movie in the same way.
Okay.
So yeah, 7.5 out of 10. So if our reach is big enough, presumably we'll get some angry hate mail about how I didn't like Firefly enough. But yeah, there you go. Alright guys, thank you for listening to another episode of Media MD. If you want to get in contact with us, we have an email address. Elliot?
It's mediamdpodcast@gmail.com.
You got that right. I'm very impressed. Next week, we'll be checking out Reservoir Dogs.